for now, it's still transparency is a nice to have, but soon it will be a need to have. And at the same time, I can say I think it's very important for companies to start now to future-proof yourself by making sure that
Definitely.
you have the information that this consumer is asking of you.
Speaking of sustainability, a podcast where we talk to frontrunners, innovators, and business specialists on, well, sustainability and where they think their industries are headed, and more importantly, how they can make them more sustainable. Hi there, this is Hani Larma from Ecochain, and in today's conversation, I'm speaking to Jolanda Kooi, the co-founder of tex.tracer, a company aiming to make the fashion industry more transparent with data collection. We talk about the importance of mapping out your supply chain in fashion and textile, and how you can best collect this data from your suppliers. Stay tuned. Well, hi Jolanda, thank you so much for joining our conversation today.
Thanks very much for having me, honey. Thanks.
Yeah, we're really happy to have you on the podcast. If we could start off with a small introduction about yourself and about what you're doing at tex.tracer.
Well, basically, I've spent the last 20 years working in the fashion industry, basically being part of the problem because I was part of various companies developing and producing private label and branded collections for retailers and brands all over Europe. It's been something I've really enjoyed doing, but at the same time, due to various reasons, one thing was Rana Plaza happening. I realized that I did no longer want to be part of that problem, but be on the other side and being part of the solution. And that's where actually, during my time there, I thought about creating transparency for the supply chain, and that ended up in our current proposition, which is tex.tracer.
Nice. I also personally worked in the fashion industry for many, many years. So I know exactly what you mean that, once you've kind of seen the enormity and the complexity of these issues firsthand, it's really hard to kind of ignore that and just keep going as status quo. So we kind of have a little bit of a similar journey there. I still love fashion and that type of thing to a certain extent, but also, yeah, seeing how big the issues actually are within the textile industry. Yeah, I also found it super important to try to find solutions and to try to be a part of a way that can actually make the fashion industry a little bit better. So, of course, you kind of touched upon it a little bit, but why do you think it's important for companies to map out their supply chain?
Well, the thing is that if you don't know what your supply chain is really about, then actually all the things that you're doing are actually greenwashing in many cases,
Hmm.
because the real change can only happen with real information. And that's why we say it's no longer acceptable to just have tier one supply chain partner information. And just for those who were unaware of what we call tier ones, basically we like to tier up our supply chain, basically saying tier zero is the client or the brand or retailer, probably their agents as well. Tier one is the cut, make, trim, confectioning party. And then tier two is wet processing. And we end up at tier four at raw material stage. And so we think it's really important to have all the information from tier one back to tier four. And because based on that information about all these supply chain parties, you can make educated decisions to really improve the fashion industry.
Do you think that there's one certain aspect of a supply chain which is the most important to know about, or are they all equally important?
Well, that's an interesting one. I think probably even you guys at Ecochain know a lot more about this because you know very well which step in the supply chain has the highest footprint. And I think that's where it needs to start. You need to really look at, if you look at footprint data, that you start there. And so, in a way, probably it's about looking at dyeing and printing, and because a lot of chemicals are used there. So, that's where you can make a big impact. At the same time, if you look at the social aspects, which is what we at tex.tracer look at it as well, there you could almost say, like in every step in the supply chain, it's important to have a look at. And
Right.
this is where I think when we started, or when many companies, and when I started to work with BSCI just over 15 years ago, I think, Amfori BSCI, um, that was a great step towards focusing more on the social standards in factories. But at that stage, it was really focusing on confectioning factories, and still it is. And
Hmm.
that's where we do see it's really important to not forget the rest of the supply chain, because
Right.
there's so much more involved. Like if we look at the average product that we track and trace for our customers, we see on average 13 steps in the supply chain. And we
Exactly.
know that
Yeah.
we haven't covered them all, because if we look even more closely to parallel supply chains of, for instance, trims and accessories, there are even more steps and thus partners involved. And all these partners have a multitude of workers that are involved in the production of that little step.
Yeah, and if it's a product, for example, that we're talking about, or even a company, there's often a lot of suppliers and supplier data, and maybe those suppliers have more suppliers. So these supply chains often get very, very complex.
Definitely. And that's the thing. I mean, I think a lot of industries have complex supply chains, but what makes the fashion industry supply chain a real complex one is that, yes, it has a lot of steps, but also, like, I always like to, I think of one of your colleagues who once mentioned the hair dryer.
Right.
That's the kind of product where hundred thousands, probably millions of the exact same one, the same style or item are produced. So they are repeat orders. It's very a continuous flow. And yes, at some point there may be a difference in a factory because someone will go bankrupt or you decide to work with someone else, but that's it. Whereas in the fashion industry, we do have some repeat orders for basic t-shirts, etc. But the bulk of the goods are seasonal items, which are produced in, well, depending on the brand, either 500 pieces or 5,000 pieces,
Right.
probably 50,000 pieces, but that's it. And that's what makes it also really complicated, because for each and every product and each and every order line, there is a different supply chain.
Right.
And if I then may just adding to that, this is what we at tex.tracer also really like to focus on, where we realize it's important, first of all, to get the information about supply chain partners. And secondly, we believe that it's important to get that data from the supply chain partners firsthand. And that's where we like to say, okay, it's really about obtaining independently verified data. Well, we get the independent data by making sure it's primary data from primary source, and it's verified by us using blockchain technology, adding timer geostamps on each and every uploaded proof, and adding an interaction part where supply chain partners are basically asked to upload details. And those details are then shown to the next partner in line for that
Right.
partner to then either accept or reject that proof. And with that, we create a digital handshake. And that altogether makes that the information we have is as reliable as possible. Is
Yeah.
it 100% waterproof? No, it isn't. There will still be a chance that actually someone has cheated on the system, but at least we're trying to really get all the data
Yeah.
that is necessary.
Yeah, you're making steps to try to make sure that it's as traceable as possible. I know that there's a lot of companies that struggle with data collection. And, as we mentioned, these supply chains, especially in the fashion industry, are just so complex and they might have a lot of suppliers to speak to. How could they make this process a little bit more smooth?
The biggest advice is actually a very small one. It's just take the first step. I hear a lot of people who are saying, okay, but I can't get it right. I can't get it 100%. Indeed, you will never score a 10 out of 10. Let's be
Right.
honest. A 10 out of 10, we need to stop all our businesses. And let's just understand and be honest and say, okay, actually, I think we are a 7 out of 10 right now. And our aim for next year is to score an 8 out of 10. Let's
Hmm.
try to take the next step, or the first step
Exactly.
towards that, and the second one indeed towards that 8 out of 10.
Yeah, and I think that that's actually kind of a reoccurring tip kind of that I'm hearing on the podcast from people who have come on. We're like, come on, let's all just go for it. Let's all get started. Let's take that first step and sharing knowledge on this topic and trying to get everybody involved. There was actually a podcast guest that was said it really interesting that we rather all do it 70% rather than one company doing it 100% because
Absolutely.
the collective effort is of course going to be something that is much more impactful than, one company doing it perfectly. And as you said, that's just also not realistic. So,
Exactly. Well, that's so true. And I think you've covered here something else as well, which is just partnerships and cooperation.
right.
It's really about doing this together. Just like while we're having this talk, we also know we like to be the data processors. Like tex.tracer is capturing the data from supply chain partners, offering that data to brands and retailers, our clients, who then can access that information, analyze it, report on it, etc. We capture also data on footprint side, which then can be reported to you, and Ecochain can actually have a look at that data and analyze it and give basically provide us with the outcome, which then
Hmm.
can be shared with consumer. But it's not that we say, oh, we're a data provider and or processor, and we're also all of a sudden going to do the analysis. No, I think we need to say, okay, this is where our strength is,
Right.
and Ecochain has a different kind of strength. Let's work together there. And that's how really all parties or many parties can be involved to create a better fashion ecosystem for the future.
Definitely. And so is there something else that you think is important for the companies to keep in mind during this data collection process?
Firstly, it is difficult to get all your suppliers to cooperate. And also there, I would say, let's really have a look at the supplier base that you're working with. Choose wisely by probably saying, okay, I will not immediately contact my 100% of my suppliers, but let's target the first 80% first.
The
And
bigger suppliers
bigger
or
supplier where you can reach more impact, you can find certain KPIs for yourselves. Again, here it's trying not to score 10 out of 10, but let's score 8 out of 10 and establish a good way of data collection with these suppliers. And only once you've reached the end goal with those suppliers, then you can move to the next phase, which would then be asking the balance 20% to also cooperate.
right,
And it's really about simplicity because the suppliers that many fashion companies work with are ranging from multinational companies to really tiny piece workers that are just
right,
individuals basically. And well, that's a very big difference, but they're somewhere in the middle. Actually, I think more on the lower side of the middle. Um, we have smaller factories with 100 to 500 to 1,000 workers that are good companies to have as a supply chain partner, but who are incapable probably of providing you with a lot of detailed information, particularly if you make create a very difficult platform to work with for them. It's very hard. You will get a lot of pushback. So this is why day in, day out, we're trying to make our platform as easily accessible as possible to make even a cotton corporation or even a cotton farmer, giving him the ability to actually work with our platform and say, okay, I understand this. This is in my
yeah.
own language. I can work on it on my mobile. It's simple. I just uploaded a little bit of data with examples so that I understand what kind of format I need to fill out.
Right. So kind of originally starting with the big suppliers, trying to get those use cases, if I may, with those big suppliers and starting out indeed, maybe not with everything, not overwhelming yourself and just kind of trying to start there, keeping it as simple as possible, and then moving down the supply chain to finally having the majority of your suppliers mapped out.
Exactly. And I think it's the same, if you look at footprint data for EcoChain, yes, you try to gather as much information as possible, but also if you gather maybe not the maximum in terms of information, you can still get an idea of the footprint of a product and understand that probably in dyeing, you have like 25% of your footprint. Well, let's then dive into that step
Hmm.
and then try to understand more about how you can make improvements on that step
Yeah.
instead of looking at a smaller step where you cannot make such an impact if you were to further look into it.
Yeah. Identifying the hotspots of where you can really make the biggest impact. So, could you maybe tell us about why you think the fashion industry needs this transparency and this data available for them or about their supply chains or value chains?
Well, I think the fashion ecosystem is in dire need of change. And it's because we only have one world. And if we go ahead the way we are acting now, we need, well, depending on the figures, maybe five worlds in a couple of years' time. That's impossible. So that's why we have to change. And that change can only really be achieved if we reduce the footprint and actually move from a linear to a circular economy and way of producing garments, if we specify specifically for the textile industry.
Hmm.
And that's where we say, well, real change cannot happen just by just acting at the end of your supply chain and say, oh, let's now make a change. No, you have to treat it as a holistic whole and start with basically eco design, design for circularity.
Right.
And even though people are thinking about that much more, even if you look at eco design, you will
Yeah.
need to understand your supply chain partners and which partners are involved so that you
Right.
can really make that change. So that's where we think it's just a start. We like to also say that it's the platform that we have as tex.tracer. It's just a means to an end. We are
Yeah.
not the solution in the bigger scheme of things. We're just a means to help people make educated decisions.
Yeah.
And those educated decisions will lead in the end to a better fashion industry. And that's why we need that transparent information.
Yeah, exactly. Even the EU is now creating legislation based off of having eco design within textiles as well. So I think that that's already goes to show that, on a governmental level, they are already putting focus and pressure on this. So for companies, I think or for brands and retailers, it is really important to understand where they stand right now so that in even if it's in a few years time that they can really make those needed improvements. Of course, waiting for legislation is not everything, but it is good that there are these upcoming legislations that are bringing attention to this
Yeah.
issue.
Unfortunately, I think it's very necessary to have indeed the legislation coming into place. For now, it's still transparency is a nice to have, but soon it will be a need to have. And at the same time, I can say I think it's very important for companies to start now to future proof yourself,
Right.
because otherwise, if you start only with this later on, it may have a real negative impact on your sales because you won't be allowed to produce certain items or having to change really rapidly, which will reduce your margins because you won't be able to really dive into
Yeah.
various options. So that's why I think it's really time to take action now. Just take that first step.
Yeah. I saw recently a study by McKinsey, and I think it was from 2019 even. So I actually assume that this has changed to an even greater degree. But the report was talking about how 52% of millennials are researching the background of the products that they buy. So when they cannot find that information, I don't think that that's necessarily a positive for that company and for their intention to purchase that product. So it is also financial gain to be able to provide more information to your consumers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even though it's always difficult to find the correct percentages, but I indeed these numbers are growing, so the percentage will be higher in the
Yeah,
future. So also there, future proof yourself by making sure that
definitely.
you have the information that this consumer is asking of you.
So when a brand or a retailer has collected this information, for example, with TextTracer, what are they able to do with these insights?
Well, one good example is a lot of our customers are working with organic cottons. It's important to them, and it's a very important step towards a more sustainable future. So we're happy to see them working with certified organic cottons. However, one of our customers, through using our platform, found out that the certified organic cottons were actually coming from Xinjiang area. in China, which is the area where Uyghurs are, well, let's put it nicely, not having the best time. And this is where that company realized, we actually always thought, okay, we tick the box by saying we are using certified organic cotton, but all of a sudden we have an additional discussion that we need to have as management of this company, whether we can allow for this certified organic cotton to uh, be originating from that area.
Right.
And this is where this company really mentioned, like, we're so happy to have that information because it gave them the power to actually have that conversation internally. And for us as tax trace, it's not up to us to decide whether they should allow it or not. But in this particular case, the company actually then said, okay, we will actually not allow this because we are against what's happening there. And so they started the conversation with the supplier, requesting the supplier to use the same organic cotton, certified organic cotton for the future, but obtaining it from elsewhere and really might impact their price level because they, to really make sure it wouldn't be coming from China, they need to get it from India or elsewhere. But they said, we do want to make that step. And that's
Right.
where it's really about enabling people to make educated decisions. That's the reality of that sentence.
100%.
So again, we're not the ones who will be telling our customers what to do if they find this, but it's really about processing the data so that the customer themselves can actually decide on what to do.
Yeah. No, 100%. Knowledge is power in the end. I know from some people who have calculated, they thought that a certain process or a certain material was, something that they are doing well or that is a positive thing. And turns out that that actually has a bigger impact than another material that they, could use as an alternative. So I think it's making assumptions without having the data is very tricky.
Absolutely. But what also comes into the equation is that something which is right today may not be right tomorrow, or maybe not the right choice for tomorrow. So things change where, our ideas about organic cottons or recycled polyesters, there is a difference, I think, from
Yeah.
where our standpoint a couple of years ago compared to the standpoint that we have right now. And maybe it will change again in a couple of years' time. It's
Hmm.
also that it's why it's not even okay to just do something right now and then just let it be. It's also about following the latest developments and researches, and that's particularly pointed to you because in a way we don't do that at TextRacer. But I
Yeah.
think that's also the great thing about doing life cycle assessments, where
Yeah.
really you can understand right now what is the actual impact of a product and how you can improve that based on the latest research.
Yeah, it's really about the continuous improvement. So, yeah, I'm a big believer that you cannot really do sustainability once. It's something that needs to be incorporated into the company and something that you think about in all the different aspects of decision making and I think knowledge on what is currently going on is of course the core of that. And also, I think even that goes into the kind of just getting started because you can have a look now and think, okay, we have the ability to change this one aspect, and we're going to keep looking at this and we're going to keep thinking about how we can improve these aspects of our company. And that can be something that, evolves over time and indeed changes but getting just started with it is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And being flexible there, indeed, like, not just saying, okay, this is it and it's black or white. I mean, there may be so many grays in between. And that's why it's important to consider it each and every day.
Exactly.
And look at it as a company altogether with all teams involved. And for instance, also, I think both of us will work a lot with CSR managers, sustainability managers, probably product managers. And yes, they are the ones who can really make those decisions in improving their supply chain and products offering. But at the same time, they also do need the involvement of management, marketing, design, et cetera, to really create a true positive impact or less negative impact.
For sure.
Yeah.
Kind of on that note, this is our last question, something I ask everybody who comes on the podcast. Are there some other people, organizations, or companies that inspire you in terms of what they do to make our economy and society more sustainable?
Yeah, well, we are a pending B Corp, and I'm saying pending because we're still a very young company, and we'll only have our final first assessment later on this year. We're very proud
Congratulations.
already to be at least a pending B Corp. So we like to look at other B Corps and understand what they are doing to basically be inspired by that. So I just finished the book by Yvonne Chenard, the founder of Patagonia,
Oh, nice.
and Let My People Go Surfing. It's an inspiring
Mhm.
book which I can definitely recommend to
Oh, nice. I'll
all
check
of
it
you.
out.
So it's truly inspiring to understand how they actually grew from a company that just wanted to offer the best quality product in each and every way, and actually understood what happened to the world and that they couldn't accept that, and then basically making sure that their products would at least do the least harm. And at some point, they said, actually, the whole reason of our existence is to make sure that we actually have a positive impact
Yeah.
for the future of our world. So that's one inspiration. And actually, as a team here at tex.tracer, we are preparing for a great event later on this month, where we talk about the trends in the fashion industry, how we can not just say, okay, it's all about transparency and educated decisions, but also what is the future of our industry? How can we really make sure that we create a better future for the next
Mhm.
generation? And there we like to say, let's be inspired by nature. Biomimicry is an important ideology, which is really based on the thought that nature has everything and nature is doing amazing things, which if you're trying to let yourself be inspired by that, can really help us when developing products. Biomimicry is also the name of the book, and so it's really about being inspired by nature, and that's another thing that I would really recommend. That
Oh,
is really
nice.
inspiring us as a team
Yeah.
at Text
Yeah.
Tracks at the moment.
But being gentle to your environment in general.
Yeah, and it's because sometimes you realize that you're so soaked up in your own world where it's like, oh yeah, we need to do better,
Hmm.
but sometimes you almost forget why you're trying to
Yeah.
do better, or it's
Or
almost
what is better?
what is better exactly. And sometimes, yeah, it's really going back to nature then helps so much by saying, well, this is how our world, what our world was meant to be. It's really about humans being part of the world and one world with nature in all its facets. And well, and I think at the moment we've lost that connection. So it's also about creating connection.
I
That's
really like that.
we like.
Well,
Yeah.
well, thank you so much for this lovely conversation. And I think that we've gotten another snapshot into the fashion industry and how we can possibly do little things to make it better. So thank you so much, Yolanda, for joining the podcast.
Thank you, honey.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for watching this chat. If you enjoyed this episode, please click here to subscribe or here for more recent episodes. Bye bye.